Hello everyone, good afternoon. I really had to twist my arm to do this. I was rather not looking forward to it because I didn't really think that compared to other people I'd have anything particularly amazing to say, but I'm going to give it a go, so bear with me. Those of you who know me and have already heard me bore you on many things over the years know what I do. I'm lucky enough to be, sorry, I can't work out how to stand up, sit down. It's a tricky one. I'm going to stand over here, I think. Is that going to annoy you? Okay. Good. I am lucky enough to be pretty embedded within the law school at City. I probably am the opposite of Jackie in that I am far too visible, frankly. That's what my family would say anyway. So I do spend a hell of a lot of time dealing with students on a one-to-one basis and academics. Those who don't know, I run a website resource for law students called Allbon, which is open to students everywhere. And so I do put a lot of effort into that, which has probably meant I've got less time to harass my academics to get me teaching on their courses, probably. But I do have a lot of input in things which aren't necessarily library related. I, for example, manage all the mooting activities at City, which is quite a hefty task, and various sort of careers, events related things as well. And so yeah, the legal research teaching I do and always have done. I've been at City 13 years, and it feels like it. It's I do something different now to how I did then, but it's not been an amazing progression, I don't think. Maybe I'm judging myself too harshly, but so in terms of City, we run a legal method course, which is a term 1 course for first year undergraduates, and then the second term is English legal system. So I have always taught on that course, to a lesser or more degree. But it's sort of, over the last couple of years, it's gone a bit haywire, I suppose, and there's a lot of people involved in it, which I don't necessarily think has improved things. We have changed around to a much more small group focus. There used to be a lot more lectures, which obviously is difficult to engage students. We have this year we've got 330 undergraduates, and that's rising. They're sort of predicting 420, I think, next year. I'm the only law librarian, so that's quite a big chunk of my time in term 1 spent on this. And it's, you've always got that difficulty with how to engage them in a lecture, on a lecture scale. City has invested quite a lot of money over the last sort of 6 months or so into playing around with different spaces, but they're often not quite big enough for what we need them for. So I need to go and have a nose around. But I know we just bought a load of, we've definitely got a couple of those tall seating, and some that have actually got like sofas as part of the lecture thing. Not sure how I feel about people lounging. try and teach them. But so now we have 3 lectures, which are to the whole cohort, and 4 workshops, which are just like 2 tutorial groups in each workshop. And there are 4 different ones of those. Underlying case and statutes, which one of the academics does, legal research, which I do, and then the other 2 are also done by, again, separate members of staff. So there's not a cohesiveness there at all, which is a big problem, I think. There are also 3 assessments, all of which are, as Ruth was saying earlier, they're pass-fail, but the students have to pass them all, otherwise they can't progress into year 2. So there's the online resources workbook, which I do, the case comment, and a moot as well, which is a lot of fun. Okay. So where do I fit in? I do 1 lecture for 2 hours, which is a thrill a minute, and it's what you would probably imagine. What I used to do a lot more focus on hard copy, and this still does have quite a big emphasis on introducing sources to students. Actually, just my next slide. I think I might give much more detail in the next slide. Sorry, I only finished this like about 1:30 this morning, so I'm just winging it basically. Then I do one workshop of 2 hours, which is with groups of 30. So I do lots of those, and they're usually over the space of like a fortnight, which means by the end of that fortnight I am good for nothing. This year, this isn't relevant at all, but this year I decided to, my dad needs to lose weight. And so to encourage him in this, I decided we'd go on a juice diet, which I really stupidly decided to do at this time. So I was doing this, teaching like sometimes 4 or 5 hours a day on just juice. Madness. I wouldn't recommend it. And then one assessment. Now I should have said the workshop, we got in what we call our sort of flexible spaces. So these are basically rooms of different size tables, and the tables can move around and stuff like that. So the idea is that they are quite, they're supposed to be very interactive, these sessions. And they generally are. And then there's one assessment which I set and I mark. I'll come on to this later, but basically it's a tremendous amount of work to set 330 assessments and mark them yourself, but I'll come back to that. So my main, apart from obviously the legal issue stuff, my main sort of thing with first year undergrads is to try and get them to understand the issues around understanding what is a quality source, not getting their knickers in a twist about all the hits they get up on Westlaw, and knowing the importance of how to keep their finger on the pulse, and to make sure they're getting the most up-to-date information. So that's the kind of stuff that's sort of embedded throughout everything, hopefully. So this is just a brief thing about what I cover in each bit. So the lecture is very much source heavy, and I introduce them to all the different sources that they should be using. And I do bring, I used to teach Holsbury statutes so that they would understand how to use an index, all that stuff. And I did actually used to have an assessment on it, but because of the time compression that we all face, that hasn't really been possible anymore. But I do still show them on the, in my lecture how to actually navigate through a multi-volume set like that, which they're obviously very excited about. And they are kind of a bit wowed by the fact that actually some people do that. And so obviously you take the time to make them aware that, just because you have the e-resources now, depending on what you do next, you may well not have them. So you can't rely on it too much. Obviously all the hierarchy of law reports, all that stuff, and I do spend quite a long time around what someone was saying, I think it was Jackie earlier, about journals and how they don't understand, what's the point of a journal, what is it? They've never encountered one before. So we do have quite a good discussion in the lecture about that. I obviously introduce them to law board stuff, so they know exactly how to get what they can out of it, show them a few videos from Learn More, so they can go and look at some of the things in a bit more detail that I've discussed. Then I do a very brief, this is how you find a case and a journal article on something like Westlaw, sometimes you do Lexis. And then the end of it is mainly around keeping up to date, so that's kind of bringing in the different free tools that there are available to keep them up to date, to manage their information that they're finding. So it's quite a lot crammed in there for 2 hours. And I used to try and lighten that by having, I used the clicker things, which I'm sure some of you used, but it just got unmanageable with so many students and me, basically. And I was always having a heart attack, I wasn't going to get them all back. So it just wasn't worth it. But I mean, we do have sort of, call out things, but I do find it challenging to keep that many students occupied for 2 hours on my own. But anyway, the workshop is obviously a lot more rewarding. I borrowed some iPads from our School of Arts, who had like a special charging thing. So I borrowed a load of iPads. Students were encouraged to bring their own devices with them. And yeah, so you'd have 2 tutorial groups in one group, flexible room, and that session is more focused around kind of 3 areas, I suppose. One is looking at free resources and, you know, this whole thing about how you judge what's authoritative, what isn't, you know, looking at things like Google Scholar, trying to sort of make them aware how important it is in their future career, how important it is to obviously have trustworthy information, what the pitfalls might be as to not having that. And then the bulk of the session is around, we usually use Westlaw in this context because of the journals included in it, and it's like completely hands-on. So I'll go through some examples, they'll do some, we'll talk about it, where they might have gone wrong, and yeah, it's quite good fun. And they do quite get into it, and the whole discussion around, I mean, I always find it's a very, I'm sure a lot of you do this as well, just to have a discussion about cost of resources and, you know, trying to get them to guess how much you pay every year for them to access these things. And often for undergraduates, you know, money is quite a big driver, and for them to find out how many thousands of pounds you're spending every year, they're so shocked often that they suddenly realise that actually maybe this is a bit important. So I was just going to show you a few things, silly exercises that I do as part of that session. I'm sure some of you have come across sites like this before. So the first bit is around, I give them a few links, I think it's about 6 or so, on Moodle, which is our VLE, and get them in small groups to just go through some of these obviously fake websites, and get them to, in small groups, discuss, you know, all the kind of elements about these websites that might make them suspicious, and they have, you know, probably have about 10-15 minutes on it, just to get them thinking about how they can be suckered in to relying on things. Particularly for things like, I know often in sort of criminal law, for example, because there are so many different pressure groups and things like that, often students just chuck any old rubbish into their essays, statistics that they can't necessarily trust and things. So we have quite a big debate about that and get them thinking about it, which they usually quite like. And there's always some slightly dim student who falls for at least one of them, which is a bit embarrassing. But yeah, this has everyone seen this site, the Tree Octopus? It's quite amusing. They've got like there's a sightings tab, and you can see all these sort of blurred pictures of apparently these octopus that live in trees. But yeah, there's quite a few of them. I think Phil Bradley's got a list of some of them on his website. But it kind of, it's a nice, easy way in. And I do find that often with legal skills, I like to go in with something that's not law related first, just to give them confidence, and then we can kind of use those to do something a bit different. The other thing I do is around keywords, and I usually bring in a load of random objects, which is usually, I have quite a big commute, so I usually get up about 5 o'clock in the morning, and usually I suddenly have a panic that morning as to, I need some objects to take in, and so I usually have to scrabble around, just grab any old rubbish, but this is the kind of thing I might take in, so, and I would just put them on the visualizer, and then again split them into groups and say, talk about a couple of those objects and think, if you're trying to retrieve that from a database, what keywords would you use? And it's surprising how, you know, they're actually really good at it, and they don't really, you know, they don't think about all the different ideas that they might have, but when they come together to discuss it, suddenly they go mad for it and start, and we have loads of different ideas. So then sometimes I get them to like do post-its, stick on the wall. We have these like glass boards at City, so they can often write their ideas up on those as well. But at the end we have, you know, a really good discussion, and because it's not, you know, it's not academic, it means that even the quiet ones who don't like to get involved too much still feel that they can kind of chip in and feel pleased that they said all stars or something. So yeah, that's quite a good one to get them going. And then I usually use another. Then I usually move on to a legal issue. So I've got one which appears in the workbook around. Actually, let me just grab it. I printed out something to have a look at to pass around. So I am organised. Okay, fine. Because as you know, many students when they're searching will just, someone said it earlier, about they just type in the essay question rather than trying to get the concept together. So I usually have one question somewhere. Where is it? So yeah, if you only knew the facts as an appeal on behalf of two men getting their own back on a gang who broke into their home with weapons. So just something like that up there, trying to get them to think about all the different words that would be associated with a problem like that, how they might actually find it. So yeah, the person who thinks of the word revenge usually feels quite proud of themselves. I'll pass these around and have a look at them. I've just included like my slides for this workshop session, and then right at the back is my assessment that I set them, so you can have a look. They're not amazing. The other thing I do is obviously try and lighten the session a bit. So I always have a load of silly exercises for them to do, which I kind of do at the speed of, I usually have some freebies to give away. So whoever gets this one first gets some kind of good prize. So yeah, just obviously finding really silly ones that some more challenging than others that will get them to use like maybe the advanced searching or something that might require a proximity search or something like that. But again, we all know law students can be quite competitive, so they quite like to get into who can find them first. So students generally seem to really enjoy it, which is obviously a good thing. I'm always thinking about the many things that I could do that would work better, but they really like the hands-on, which I'm sure is a no-brainer, and they like there being silly examples for them to look for. They are very driven by a lot of the comments I got in the assessments this time were, we need more prizes, you should bring chocolate along. So they're very driven by that. They really like the use of their iPads as well, they really got into that. So the assessment is basically a workbook, and it's done online, so it's on Moodle, but because I don't just want it to be an assessment where they have to find the answer, I actually want them to tell me their research trail, which basically makes it incredibly hard to mark, because although I can set up Moodle to mark the answers, more or less, I can't set it up to mark the method, I've got to do that. So yeah, 330 pieces of work. Actually, it would be easier if they were in hard copy, if they were just on my desk and I could just go through them. But they're not, they're online, so I've got to do it online. Also, there are however many different ways that they could find something, even in just using one database. So you really, most of the time I was just double checking they weren't trying to pull the wool over my eyes, because they could, obviously some of them work together, they're not supposed to. You can kind of pick that up quite easily. But sometimes there are quite a few examples this year where they clearly knew the answer from somebody else, and they tried to fit the strategy around it. And I was looking at them, yeah, that's not going to work. You'd have never known, you'd have never got to that from that question. So it took forever, and I spent, I think, about 4 days of Christmas marking. And then a couple of weeks ago, the deadline was coming up, and I'd said, a couple of my colleagues had said, oh, we can help you. I was like, brilliant. And so I was sort of thinking that they would mark at the same rate that I was. And so I sort of thought, that's okay, I can have that couple of days to finish off. But they were taking like 3/4 of an hour to mark one. And it probably takes me 15 minutes to mark each one. So I had a whole weekend basically with, I think, 3 hours sleep. So yeah, but I made the deadline. But yeah, it's a good exercise because it does get them to really think about how they're getting the answer, and it's really gratifying to see that in their responses, they are using all the different things that I told them about. So they are, they're getting in the different, different connectors, thinking about the synonyms, and they, on the whole, have sort of taken things on board, which is really good. In the past, I've experimented with various. I've always done some version of this, but I have in the past done a couple of years ago I did something around law as well, so they did like a video critique of an area of law, which was obviously quite helpful for me to see where I might want to make some improvements. And it also got them involved in the resource when they'd only been a student a couple of weeks, so that was quite good. And they used to have a Holsbury Statutes workbook as well, which they used to absolutely hate, but when they got to the end of it, they felt quite a sense of achievement, but it was a bit deathly. The dream, really, the ideal, and this has been touched on by various people, and I was really, I was really wowed by what a lot of people have said today, which is really, kind of really exciting, the idea that you could have research integral to substantive subjects. But yeah, on a smaller scale, what really needs to happen to this module is that it needs to be tied together so that you are, basically, we need to have an assessment in mind in one of their other substantive subjects, maybe contract or criminal, and then everything needs to lead up to that. And the same problem needs to be, I need to be helping them do research in my bit, so that's going to help them research for their moot, and that's going to help them with their case comment as well, and then they'll help them with the assessment. That needs to happen. So we'll see about whether that can for next year. But yeah, the scaffolding is just non-existent at the moment, and it needs to be there. Thank you very much. That's my puppy. It's very
As you know, I external at City for 5 years until last year.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I used to raise at every exam board I went to was why didn't they diversify their assessments? Because not only in the subjects that I examined, but in, I think, most of the subjects in second and third year, they examined by 100% unseen exam, which suggests that none of the skills that you have got the students to learn has ever been practiced, except if they may have dissertations or something. There may be some modules where they have a chance, but I never saw them. And that's quite disastrous, actually, it seems to me, because you go further than almost anyone I've ever seen in developing, those critical skills in the first year, and then they have no opportunities, as far as I can see. It may be changing now, of course, because there's some new direction. But
Yeah.
Are you getting the sense that they're introducing coursework? Is that coursework ever going to be linked to the skills they learn in the first year?
Is it still being recorded?
Yes.
You want to get this out? Yeah, you're perfectly right. There hasn't really, it always has been very straight. There's been no diversification at all. I think there are a couple of modules where they are trying things a bit differently, and there is a greater emphasis on a lot of our elective subjects for more practical things, which is quite good as well. But the research, no.
Ordinary research skills.
Yeah, no.
Because, for example, you get them finding out cases on a particular topic, but they'll never have to do that in land law or equity, because basically the case list is written there. The textbook will tell them which cases to look at.
Yeah.
It may, if it's a good textbook, even mention the odd article. They're never ever going to have to do that kind of research.
No. And most of our students don't do dissertations either. Most of them would do an extra elective, so yeah.
I wish I was still external there, because then I could really push
You
it
could
on.
let rip.
I tried year after year after year. I said, you're the only law school I've ever come across, I may be wrong, that really still has this emphasis on the 3-hour unseen exam. They were a bit surprised, but they didn't do it.
There are more sort of research-led assessments now, but
Was it not talking to you? Or?
well, no, not in that sense, no. No, that's the weird thing, is that they maybe, I don't know whether it's as a result of because I've diversified my role so much, whether they don't always, they just take it as read. The students know that because they know where I am and they can sort that out, but they don't need to assess it. I don't know, it's a weird thing. Thank you for the question. My job is done. Thank you.
you borrowed the iPads. Was there a reason for iPads or laptops? Were you doing something different?
No, it was only really very portable.
That's what you carried.
As I said, it's only me, so I had to carry them place to place. But we don't really have any facility for laptops at the city where you can kind of borrow them. I just happen to know. And obviously the students still think they're quite sort of sexy, so they're more excited about that than probably a laptop.
So you don't have a dedicated training room?
I do have one, but it only takes 23 students, which would mean I'd have to spend many more hours trying to cram them in. So no, we had to go with what we had, which would take about 30 hours.
I picked up on the keeping up to date aspect of your lecture. I was just interested from a personal perspective. What are you covering that particular resources now?
It's a kind of split between sort of social media stuff. So I give them quite a lot of examples about obviously Twitter, but as well as things like the alerting services on the databases and stuff. So, but just trying to get them excited about things and about how particularly law, even though in an essay would be so reliant on the journal articles, but the fact that the timing of the publication of that often is so much further down the line. So letting them know that they're really serious about their life, in law, that they really need to be looking at all these different avenues to make sure they're up to date.